oppression from birth to death, and their extreme vulnerability was a consequence of state policies and practices implemented by Myanmar over decades. Thus, in the words of the IIMM, the clearance operations were the culmination of decades of systemic persecution and disenfranchisement under which the Rohingya had been stripped of citizenship, excluded from education, denied health care, and marginalized from political participation. Put simply, prior to the clearance operations, the Rohingya were already, as a consequence of state-sponsored oppression, in a state of extreme precariousness. This was by design. And to ensure that the Rohingya were ripe for destruction, in the months preceding the clearance operations, Myanmar implemented a multi-pronged effort to increase their vulnerability to an unprecedented level, even when measured against the deprivations to which Myanmar has subjected them for years. This took the form of mutually reinforcing measures. One such measure was limiting access to food. In July 2017, Myanmar terminated the World Food Programme's authorization to deliver critically needed food assistance. Myanmar does not dispute that it terminated the program's authorization or that of other humanitarian organizations, including Action contre la faim, the largest such organization operating in Rakhine State. In fact, Myanmar admits, to use its words, restrictions were temporarily imposed on the provision of humanitarian aid. The only explanation it offers is that, quote, shortly before August 2017, Myanmar discovered that World Food Programme biscuits had been found at an ARSA camp, which suggested that the UN agency might have supporters of ARSA terrorists among its number, end quote. That quote can be found at paragraph 3.91 of the rejoinder. It is the totality of Myanmar's excuse for terminating food aid to the entire Rohingya population. Mr. President, in July 2017, the World Food Programme reported the results of a food security assessment survey of 450 households in 45 villages in Buthidaung and Mongdao townships. Those are the townships where the Rohingya population exceeded 90% and where the Tatmadaw would soon carry out many of the clearance operations. This is what the program reported to be the situation in regard to food security when Myanmar forbade the delivery of humanitarian aid. During the 30 days prior to the survey, about 1/3 of the households faced extreme food insecurity, such as no food of any kind in the household, 28%. Went to bed hungry, 34%, or went the whole day and night without eating, 28%. Nearly 90% of the households were worried about not having enough food, 89%. None of the 82 children from 6 to 23 months old met the requirements for a minimum adequate diet. Only 2.5% reached minimum dietary diversity, and only 8.5% met the minimum meal frequency requirements. Households were employing Crisis and emergency type coping strategies, such as begging for food, 29%. The World Food Programme's July 2017 report warned long-term will depend on humanitarian assistance in the near future. Specifically, the program estimated that approximately 38,000 households, corresponding to 225,800 people, are in need of humanitarian assistance. Despite these emergency conditions, Myanmar imposed restrictions that affected all of the agencies that had provided food assistance. This is described in the IIMM prepared witness statement of Mr. Andrew Riley, a humanitarian aid worker employed by Action contre la faim in Mogdao from May to August 2017. That is, in the months leading to the clearance operations until his evacuation when they began. He testifies that the termination of food aid occurred only a few weeks before the August 2017 violence. Myanmar restricted the Rohingyas' access to health care as well. Médecins Sans Frontières reported that on August 11, 2017, the organization lost government authorization to carry out medical activities in northern Rakhine State. Together with the food restrictions, this not only made the Rohingya physically more vulnerable, it permitted the Tatmadaw to carry out the clearance operations largely free from outside observation. Again, Myanmar does not deny imposing the restriction in advance of the clearance operations. It does not even pretend that preventing health care was an anti-terrorism measure. It simply asserts that the organization was later able to resume operations. But a year later, the organization remained unable to access northern Rakhine State. Even before imposing the food and medical restrictions, Myanmar undertook to render the Rohingya defenseless, utterly so. Myanmar ordered the removal of fences around Rohingya homes. The fact-finding mission reported that Rohingya villagers in northern Rakhine State were ordered to remove their fences from around their properties. This order, the mission found, was widely implemented in the 3 townships. The mission determined that village administrators charged with enforcing the order were sometimes accompanied by security forces, with soldiers or police removing fences by force. Non-compliance, the commission reported, often resulted in beatings and fines. The U.S. State Department's randomized survey reported dozens of respondents saying that the authorities had removed fences before the attacks, either by doing so themselves or by forcing Rohingya villagers to do so. Myanmar does not dispute that it imposed this measure. Here is how one witness described to the fact-finding mission the way in which Myanmar implemented the fence removal program. A few months before August 2017, the village chairman, an ethnic Rakhine, accompanied by the military, demanded us to remove the fences from the yards and around the houses. They visited the village together with the police 3 times in 1 month after the order to remove the fences was issued. The witness told the fact-finding mission the villagers who did not implement the order were beaten and had to pay fines to the chairman. The impact was plain for all to see. This is what the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in Myanmar
Kalau